My name is Brian Sanders. I'm a news anchor at Denver7, and alongside me is Jason Vitello, and he is a behavioral health coordinator with Denver Public Health, also the director of health equity for Colorado Public Health Association. Thank you so much for joining us, and we want to get right to May, which is National Mental Health Awareness Month, and we here at Denver7 are committed to partnering with the Let's Talk Colorado initiative campaign, where we get the conversation started. We really want to build awareness and education for mental health for everyone. But specifically today, we want to talk about the importance of men's mental health. And Jason, I'll kind of refer to you because you've spoken to a lot of different men in different areas of careers and different points of their life. What do you see as the most important thing we want to address when it comes to men's mental health?
So, yeah, I'll start by saying that before I was a public health professional, I spent several years as a direct service provider, therapist, a social worker, and a case manager, working not exclusively but pretty extensively with men and male youth, from juvenile probationers, foster youth, men in recovery, veterans, non-custodial fathers. I also like to point out that before I was a professional helper in any capacity, I was a young man in need of some help himself. And along the way, I've really had kind of a ringside seat to what many are calling a crisis in male mental health, which I also believe is a crisis in public health, given the fact that men account for 75% of the chronically homeless. 80% of all completed suicides are by men. That's about 510,000 men per year, one man per minute globally. Mm-hmm. Here in Colorado alone, the suicide rate for men is about 4 times that of women. Men are twice as likely to become addicted to substances or die from a drug overdose. 80% of all individuals arrested for violent crime are men. And 93% of all prisoners, and we know that a significant percentage of those are nonviolent drug offenders. And the implications of all this, suicide, substance use, violence, incarceration, over-incarceration, that doesn't just impact men alone, it impacts children, families, women, partners, communities, and all of society, which makes it a public health issue.
And we want to tell all of you who are watching right now, if you have a question, if you yourself feel like you are going through a mental health crisis, if you know someone who is going through one, be sure to send us your questions. We are streaming this on the Denver7 Facebook page and on our website right now, thedenverchannel.com. You mentioned that you were at one time troubled. How did you find help?
There were people in my life that men, and I'm going to paint with some broad strokes when I talk about men. I know we're all different, but typically, we put up a pretty strong front from time to time.
Right.
We are not always taught to experience or express uncomfortable emotions in a healthy way, right? From a very early age, we're told to man up in the face of adversity, or to stop crying before we are given something to cry about. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we don't do a good job expressing uncomfortable feelings in our prisons and our bars, and unfortunately a lot of cemeteries are filled with men and boys who never learned that lesson. Luckily, I feel my parents were supportive in that expression, and despite the fact that I did experience some problems, I was open to getting help. I was also a father, and I realized the stakes were much higher. So reaching out for help is a big barrier that a lot of men feel stigma against doing, as well as accepting. And I was willing to take help from people who were there, and it has everything to do with why I want to be there to help others today.
Certainly. And I mean, you touched on it. I mean, men have this stigma of having to be tough. They don't want to ask for help. They don't want to cry. A lot of times, big family decisions they feel like may weigh on them, whether it's, being the breadwinner of the family, or, being the quote unquote man of the house. How does simply opening up and talking about it, being real with your feelings, help the situation?
You know, I think there's a myth that men don't like talking and opening up and sharing their feelings. And I've been a therapist as well as a group therapist for gang members, for non-custodial fathers, for combat veterans, like really hard men who will open up, who will share their feelings and will cry with one another. And in actuality, I found that men will open up if it's safe to do so.
Yeah.
I think it's important. It can be validating to let the weight off, and especially when you're around others who are actually going through similar experiences, can be very, very meaningful.
If you are a family member or a son or a friend, you notice that a loved one is kind of going through, you notice something is off, they're not quite themselves, how would you recommend that person initiate the conversation, maybe try and get that help started?
Right, so keeping in mind that men often experience depression and other mental illness differently. They might not be sad and mopey. They might be more irritable. They might be drinking more. They might be taking more risks. So any significant change in behavior, whether if someone's typically outgoing and gregarious and is suddenly quiet, or vice versa, paying attention to that. And really, there's a false belief around suicidality, for instance. Most people who are suicidal do not self-refer. They don't go out and try to find a therapist. The people that get help because the people in their lives notice that things are amiss. And oftentimes they don't take no for an answer. Or I'm fine, right? Which is what we say typically. How are you? You don't want to bother anybody, so you say, I'm all right. I'm all right. And maybe it's continuing to ask and being persistent and saying, no, you're not. And usually that will allow someone to feel like they can open up.
What do you feel like it takes to kind of get a man or a person to kind of cross over from being so defensive, no, I don't need help, to kind of acceptance, like, okay, let's talk about this, let's take a step in the right direction?
Again, that persistence, which demonstrates to the person experiencing a problem that actually someone does care, and I don't have to carry this alone. And again, just being persistent, not taking I'm fine for an answer, but also understanding that maybe that person's not ready, and maybe 50 people ask, and it's the 50th person that he'll finally open up to. You don't know if you're 4 or 49 or 50. I think your job is to ask, and that's you doing your part.
If there's a man out there that maybe has some self-awareness that things are getting tough for them, they notice a change in themselves, where can they go? What do you recommend they do as a first step?
Unfortunately, the vast majority of mental health treatment is not in healthcare, it is in criminal justice. And men who receive behavioral health or substance use treatment for the first time usually are receiving that treatment after being arrested and convicted for a violent offense or a substance use related crime. Or I've also found that men very often wait until they have hit rock bottom in life or are on the verge of doing so. For instance, when I was working at the VA and my phone is ringing, I knew that chances are the other end of that line is a veteran, probably a man who is on the verge of losing a spouse, a job, a home, or is facing some other life crisis. And his life has really spiraled out of control. And unfortunately, a lot of men wait until some trauma or tragedy that could have been avoided. My advice would be to reach out before that happens. To someone you know, potentially, but sometimes it helps to even talk to a stranger. And I think you have information for the Colorado Crisis Line, which is an excellent resource here in Colorado. It's a 24-hour crisis hotline. And it's funny, I toured there about a year ago and I asked one of the supervisors about male utilization. I asked, do men call this number? And she smiled and she said, yeah, they do. Late at night.
Really?
Late at night, usually after everyone in the house is asleep.
Yeah.
And probably after they've been drinking. And they will only open up after repeated assurances of confidentiality. Again, when they feel it is safe.
Right.
Right. So part of it is men themselves, but we as a society allowing men to be safe and experiencing the full range of human emotions. This isn't about making men more feminine, which is a lot of the backlash when we have conversations like this. It's not about that. It's about men being able to experience all emotions and express them, learning to express them in a healthy fashion.
Yeah. And we want to mention to people who are watching right now, the number to call for the Colorado Crisis Services is 1-844-493-TALK. We also have it up here on the graphic behind us, or you can go to letstalkco.org. That will also get you to a range of resources. And we're talking a lot about men's mental health specifically today. We know that there may be some women watching this as well. How is men's mental health and women's mental health, how can those be different?
Again, the way men experience mental health symptoms or depression symptoms are sometimes different, but ultimately it's not an either or, right? If men are healthier and are taking care of themselves and getting the mental health treatment that they need, this is going to make not only their lives better, but the lives of their children, the lives of women, and really a better society. And, you know, Terry Real, who is a family therapist and an educator on these issues, talks about what he calls the halving. It's HALVING, and how we draw a line, and on one side of the line are feminine characteristics and qualities, and on the other are male characteristics. For instance, being strong, being stoic, and you know, having a sense of justice. And I want to say that these characteristics are not bad; they are good, right? And on the other side, you have characteristics such as being nurturing, compassionate, soft, vulnerable. And women have been encouraged for the past 50 plus years to go over the line and start living out categories on the other side for their betterment. And we as a society, we have a long way to go, but I think we've done a better job as a society encouraging that. We have not really done that for men. And as a result, men are living strictly, or trying to live strictly in this binary, right? So again, when we are all more whole and complete people, it's going to improve. When we all do better, we all do better, is what I like to say.
Yeah.
And this conversation is not meant to negate the mental health challenges experienced by women.
Sure.
At all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly want to thank you, Jason, for being here and opening up to us about not only, you know, your personal battle with the mental health, but helping so many other people through their struggles, and certainly want to again extend an invitation to those of you who know someone, or if you yourself are going through a mental health crisis, to reach out to letstalkco.org or call the number again 1-844-493-TALK to get some help that certainly you deserve. And through this, we hope that we just continue to educate and keep the conversation going about the importance of mental health. So thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot.
All right.